very visible way. You have many countries on the Red Sea. You have many countries facing the Bab. So the question arises, if this is the case, that there's no doubt that when I wrote this book on Somaliland and its quest for international recognition, I highlighted that Somaliland has reached where it is of the reconstruction effort, the involvement of the Somaliland diaspora, the involvement of a range of South Africa always says, you can have the best of constitutions, but you can't take a nation, but reconstructing the country and providing basic resources to the people of Somaliland, and as further coming up with a very vision. But essentially in that chapter, I outline how Somaliland was able to manage the fact that you had internally interpretations of Islam which were locally driven, broadly Sufi, broadly inclined from a local perspective. But how it had to manage the fact that you had right across the Red Sea a foreign, a Saudi interpretation of Islam, and the whole interpretation of Islam known as Wahhabism. How does that enter into this to manage that tension, if you like, between a local interpretation and a regional interpretation of Islam? I've written a lot about this because I believe, and I know some countries in the Horn of Africa, perhaps during question and answer we could go into detail, have decided to ban foreign interpretations of religion in a country. And that has led to religious cohesion in some, not all. There's only one country in the Horn has done that. And it has led to religious harmony and cohesion. But in other countries where it's not been done, I'm afraid to say the major fault line is the tension, the enmity, which has done, and how the political elites within Somaliland, as well as the community, as well as institutional partners of the government of Somaliland will deal with, as well as the foreign partners of Somaliland deal with it, will also determine the project of peace and stability in Somaliland. The last R I spoke about in this book is the project of recognition. I've never seen people more passionate than in reconciliation, reconstruction, religion, and recognition, and they are interrelated. So that brings me, and perhaps during Q&A we'll go more into detail, ensuring from my interaction with Somaliland that the project is achievable. Early on I was telling to Dr. Hussein, Tanzania, that before I engaged with the project of Solution from Somaliland came, headed by the former foreign minister of Somaliland in the year 2000, and this meeting took place in the presidency, and the then minister in the presidency had very strong interaction with Somaliland leaders going back to our struggle days. Many people will not know, and perhaps some do know, that many of the leaders in Somaliland helped South Africa a lot. I think many of you all may know that a very well-known Somalilander headed the Center Against Apartheid in the UN. And he played a critical role in helping us, as well as many other Somaliland leaders who hosted ANC leaders here. So for us, Somaliland and our relations with Somaliland has historic roots. So when that meeting concluded in the presidency, the South African presidency in 2000, I was asked to host the Somaliland delegation and be engaged. I was then sharing with my friends and colleagues yesterday afternoon, I was then asked to be involved with the South Sudan project of self-determination. And as we see South Sudan as well, because we had to convince President Bashir of Sudan why he needed to be there on the Independence Day of South Sudan. Under Q&A, we can go into that project a bit more in detail. But I have no doubt that my engagement with Somaliland earlier to bring about some level of a reasonable transition of South Sudan. And then my political principles in their wisdom felt I should help now Eritrea in its, as one of the youngest countries in Africa after South Sudan, to help them in their project of advancing self-determination in a real way. So I'm glad to be back in Somaliland. It seems like a full circle, but a worthwhile circle, a circle which allows me now to assess where Somaliland is and what can be done to ensure that in the regional as well as international interest of advancing Somaliland's peace and stability, as well as its prospects for international recognition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to Ambassador Despai as well for that incredibly comprehensive presentation, which frames the issues very well for us in our discussions. And I'd like to open it up to you now for hopefully very concise questions and comments so that we can take a couple of questions to begin with. Any takers? Yes? Conrad? Suad?
There. Thanks very much for those very interesting presentations. My question is to the Minister. As a New Zealander, I've naturally got a very strong interest in the Commonwealth. Could you outline what are you doing in terms of affiliating Somaliland more with the Commonwealth in particular?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. My name is Suad. My question is regarding, you said, the Ambassador Iqbal said that Somaliland has a case. But it seems the world hasn't been listening. And it seems that all of international community are willing to build Somalia, build or have representative like embassies in a war zone. So-called have an embassy in Somalia, but don't have any representatives in Somalia to live in a war zone. Actually, to have or conduct businesses at the airport because they can actually go into the city. So what I don't understand is, if we have a case and if we have fulfilled all of the obligation as a nation, the democratic nation who have all of the institutions, we have a rule of law, we have most of the things that would actually would be prerequisite for recognition. Why is it that all of the world or international community are willing to have offices and representations in a war zone and not in Somaliland and Hargeysa?
Thank you so much. Of course, yesterday I was actually asking this question, but it was avoided. I think many of us were, we didn't have the facts the way they have actually been underlined. Now, there are two things that I want to to touch on. One is democracy and the other one is the media. Of course, one of the two diplomats there actually say that Somaliland has a case. And maybe just to amplify that case is to say that there's something about Somaliland, about their democracy, that this country from 1991 has actually had peaceful transitions. An incumbent president actually handing power to an incoming president. Kenya, my country where I come from, we have been independent for the last 50 years, but we've never had a situation in those 50 years where we've had an incumbent president handing over, a leadership peacefully. So I think Somaliland has a case even in terms of democracy. Now, the other issue was the Foreign Affairs Minister talked about the media. How can the media actually play a part in projecting the case of Somaliland? I think one of the things I've been involved in a media project where I was invited by a country, by the Department of Culture, just to go and learn. It was a group of many journalists from around the world, just to go and learn about the culture of a country and write about it when we go back to our countries. So I think this is something that you can take up. Maybe if journalists had these facts that the two of you have ably spoken about, then they should be in a position to project the case of Somaliland.
Hello. We'll come back with another round of questions, but give the panel an opportunity to respond first.
On the question of the Commonwealth, Somaliland has been a member of the family of former colonies of Britain and should be a member of the Commonwealth. We did apply for an observer status, I understand, and that application is still pending. And I hope it will be now easier that Britain is out of EU to get admission into the Commonwealth. But our goal is eventually to become a member of the Commonwealth, and we hope New Zealand will be able to support us in that endeavor. On why the international community hasn't recognized Somaliland despite having a good case is the question. I think we need to put that question to the international community itself. But sometimes, as you said clearly, it makes you wonder why failure is rewarded and success is penalized. I don't think that helps even Somalia as well. I think the way forward for Somalia to get the stability and the security it needs is to reward Somaliland. As I have said on many occasions, if Somaliland is recognized, I think the world can leave to us the task of bringing Somaliland around and reconciling the community, because the problem is not so much whether there is a president in Mogadishu or not. It is the question of going through a process of reconciliation within the community, and I think that has been bypassed. That's our experience, and I think we can share that experience with our brothers in Somalia. I totally agree with my friend here from Kenya. Somaliland has demonstrated 5 elections, 2 presidential, all declared free and fair. I think in that sense we're unique in this region and perhaps in Africa as well. And we'll definitely use the media. Thank you.
Let me start with the question asked by Suad. Is the world listening or not? I think there are a number of different, able foreign minister and former foreign minister. In the world we are living, every morning you come to your desk, there are hundreds of files to look at. And the question you asked that morning, which one needs more attention? They're competing interests. They're competing issues. And your case will get attention to. I know you've done a lot. I know many of you have done a lot. But that's the reality under which we live. Now, there's another dimension also I just want to highlight. You have, and I've seen this recently at the Geneva Human Rights Council of the UN, you have what you call in international relations now, called bullying. You have a bully. People bully each other, like in high school. Put you out of the way. So the question is how you deal with international bullying is going to be a very important issue. I saw this the whole of June because South Africa had to chair the African ambassadors in Geneva, where we were discussing very difficult issues in the Human Rights Council, and one or two countries tried to bully us. So we had to step back as South Africa chairing the group of African ambassadors and say, okay, if this country is bullying us, let's find another way to achieve our objectives as to what type of UN HRC resolution we want in Geneva. The situation is fluid all the time, and one has to constantly ask, how does the terrain look at? How does the terrain currently look? What should be our next move? Because the terrain is shifting all the time. So I appreciate the efforts being made by numerous institutions, but as Dr. Saad Shiri has correctly pointed out, you have to be very selective now, focus your energy on who and the partners you know would bring about the results. My view is that without a peaceful Somalia, you're not going to have a peaceful Somaliland. So the question for me would be to the international community, how could we ensure that the neighborhood is peaceful? I've seen this. I've been 4 years and 3 months in Ethiopia and Eritrea, started on 12th of June. From 12th of June till the day I left Asmara, the 30th of June, myself and many other ambassadors, most of us slept 2 or 3 hours a day because we had to be on top of the issues. We had South African children, husbands, wives. We wanted to make sure that we are not caught napping. So my essential point is, Suad, the nature of geopolitics works in such a way that one has to constantly assess to see how your case can become more visible, can get the attention required. But it's clear, off the record, people will tell you a lot of things. But on the record, how to get that advanced is the challenge. I believe the engagement I have had with the UK ambassador in many parts of the world, the EU ambassadors, ambassadors of other countries, I believe once we've achieved what Dr. Saad Ali Shiri mentioned of some traction on this file on the African front, particularly the African Union front, and select African fronts, then the question of other fronts like the Commonwealth, the OIC, and the rest of them, I think will come by almost naturally. Just yesterday I saw South Sudan is applying for membership of the Arab League of Nations. And Sudan is supporting it, Egypt is supporting it. Of course, it's another debate whether one should join or not, but that's another debate for another date. The question by our colleague and friend from Kenya, there is little doubt that the Somaliland case even presents where not only a president comes in power and then leaves office for another president, but also the dynamic that you had a president from a majority clan, the Ishaq, and then you have a president from a minority clan, yeah? The previous president, Zahir Rayali Kahin, yeah? So how that dynamic also worked is a fascinating case study itself, worthy of more probing and writing in that regard. But I can't but agree that the media can play a big role in emulating, in presenting the facts about Somaliland's case of democracy. And I think what helped a lot is in the former liberation movement in Somaliland, the SNM. You had, if you look at the table of the head of the SNM over the years, they would change them every year. I think there was only once or twice. The chairperson of the SNM was for about 2 years, and that helped a lot in embedding, if you like, or ingraining within the DNA of Somalilanders about the need for new leadership, for new blood, for the ethos of a democratic culture. Thank you.
I'm from Ghana. Cultural aspect of propagating the case of Somaliland has taken second place to the diplomatic and the political, considerations. And yet, the first two lies in the bosom of a few, whilst the cultural aspect can be participated by a very wide, people, if I should so put it. I think there should be more emphasis on the cultural aspect for this propagation, in that people count knowledge about Somaliland aside the Horn in East Africa count. We in West Africa are virtually ignorant, if I should so bluntly put it, to the extent that personally, when I was invited here, and I kept telling people, I was going to Somaliland, and people were alarmed. They automatically equated Somaliland with Mogadishu. And it was like, why would you accept an invitation to go to Somaliland? And they were asking questions that I myself could not answer because I was ignorant, I didn't know enough. So, as I said, people count, and each and every one of us, it's our task, especially this concept of guest country, inviting guest countries, is so brilliant, because then we go back and also talk about Somaliland. When I go, of course, I'm not thank you. I'm not so ignorant about it anymore, so I'll be very proud and I'll boast about it. But it's sad, to the extent that I had to tell, to cut everything short, since I couldn't answer all the questions about Somaliland. I had to tell my husband, actually, it's just Ethiopia, to cut everything short, It's sad. So I'm saying that those of us here from other countries, let us make it our mission to propagate the message of Somaliland when we go.
Good morning. My name is Beverly Namboza. I come from Uganda. My question is for Dr. Saad Shire. How do you think the consumption of creative literature amongst Somaliland children today would influence the leadership in 20 to 50 years' time?
Hello, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this passionate debate. I guess in the international community, one community that recognizes Somaliland is the international business community. Whether it's Coca-Cola, Janelle from Turkey, or even DP World, they have been involved in Somaliland. And that's a testament of the institutions and the entrepreneurship culture that exists here. My question is, what do we do about the issue of guarantee? Because other countries can actually do a sovereign guarantee and can basically, for the next 30 years, if a deal is made here, they can count on that investment to come back in a safe hands. So how do we come around and go around that? That is a question we face a lot in the business community. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ahmed. I have a question to Dr. Saad, the Foreign Minister of Somaliland. As Somalilanders, yes, I think the leadership of Somaliland has succeeded a lot in locally, but I think, in my opinion, our foreign or as internationally, we are lucky enough. So my question is there any strategic plan for getting, for reaching to get a full recognition? Do we have a roadmap? My question is that. My second question is related to the talks of Somalia that you have mentioned. We know that the talks were continuing for the last 4 years, and we don't see, and still we don't have, I've seen any achievement or progress. So, what other alternatives, if these talks are valid, what other alternatives that we have to have any, to get our recognition to any issue? That's my two questions. Thank you.
Well, with regard to the role of art in the recognition of Somaliland, the cultural diplomacy is one of the strategies which we should be using, perhaps more often than not. We have been talking to the politicians mostly so far. We should be talking to the people through art and culture. So I think that's something we need to do more. We should have our artists touring Africa and touring Europe and America. And like the media, they will attract attention. And I think put Somaliland on the map. So that's an area we need to work on. Thank you for mentioning that. Right, with regard to the children and what they write and their influence on future leadership, I think that's very important because the children of today will be tomorrow's leaders. And tomorrow's leaders will be shaped by the values and the views and the ideas which they are exposed to at this early stage. So I think whatever they write now as children will definitely influence young creative minds so that they will have they will have influence on the other children and on our future as well. With regard to the guarantees, what guarantees can Somaliland give to investors? I suppose that's the question. Normally, in a sovereign, in a recognized country, either the state will provide the guarantee or a third party, like the World Bank, will provide a guarantee. Of course, there are also insurance, which the company can take. Now, because Somaliland is not recognized, we cannot get guarantee from World Bank, from the World Bank. And of course, we do have some local insurance companies, but we don't have international insurers here, and that's a problem. But the government does provide a guarantee. And companies like the World Bank are happy to be satisfied with the guarantee which the government itself provides. I think everybody understands that Somaliland is a stable country. I don't think anybody, is worried about Somaliland disappearing in the coming 5 years. We have been here for the past 25 years and will be here forever. Do we have a roadmap for recognition? Well, we have a policy now, and you can look it up in our website. And as I pointed out this morning, I think we do have a strategy as well, to get recognition. And with regard to the talks with Somalia, it's true the talks hasn't been successful so far. Even though you can say, well, the fact that they have been going on itself is a success, But we think for the time being, that's the best way to determine and establish the final states between the two countries. We believe we will be able to achieve peaceful divorce or separation through this process, and we would like the international community to support that process. Thank you.
I'd just like to touch on the question of credit guarantees by countries. In other words, a country provides a credit guarantee, which then banks can advance loans for projects in a country or advance the required money. I'm hopeful, and I hope friendly countries would help us in this regard. There's a new head of the IMF Africa section. Her name is Fundi Shabalala. Fundi was in the region. She's just taken her post up beginning of this year. And Fundi, I believe, can possibly deliver in spite of some of the complexities we would face and outlined by Dr. Saad Ali Shire. She spent a week in the region and in February trying to cover each country as extensively as possible. Of course, she did not cover as yet neither Somalia or with the fact that the IMF, as the board is currently constituted of some G20 members, G20 states like China and other countries, it's a new type of board. And the latest IMF World Economic Outlook report, which came out end of April, report to the ones you've seen previously. So investors look at that report and of course, and accordingly decide to invest. So I think if we encourage Fundi, the executive director of Africa, to come here, I'm hopeful of some movement and some results. I know the challenges businesses face in this regard. When we were, as you may know, South African mining companies are heavily involved in Eritrea, in the gold, copper, zinc, and now in potash. So the first thing, of course, when big business comes to any country, they would ask, does the country provide credit insurance to the banks who would lend money to them and advance money? I'm glad that the There's a number of countries now sending their credit insurance corporations to countries in the Horn of Africa. I know Sweden, for example, was interested corporation. And and as a result then the question arises out of the visit of providing a credit guarantee. So I know credit insurance corporations like the ECIS, the Export Credit Insurance Corporation, have provided credit guarantees. I know it's not going to be easy, but I know it can be done, and it has been done. So what this corporation looks at is the guarantee of a government itself for the finances advanced by a bank and a country. But I think what helps in that project of getting credit insurance is the strong political friendly ties between the two countries. Credit Insurance Corporation, we called them to our International Relations Ministry and we said, we want you to do ABC. Of course, we didn't dictate it, but we shared with them all the information, and on the basis of the country information, they did their own research with their own experts on the country concerned, went there, and then within a week released their report providing credit insurance. And then, yes, the banks like Standard, Barclays, FNB, and others started advancing loans to mining companies and other interested companies.
Thank you very much. We'll have one final round before we close for discussion.
And some explanations as well. One of the questions that was raised from the floor was the application of Somaliland to become a member of the Commonwealth. That idea was very much in the minds of the people of Somaliland. And at one time, we did apply for a membership as well as for observer status. The reply that we were given at that time was, of course, every country has a right to apply to become a member of any organization, but the application needs to be supported by existing member states. That was the stumbling block, and I would like to explain why that became a stumbling block. We need to recall that it has been 49 years since Somaliland and the existence of Somaliland has been blocked. It dates back to 1969, when the Marxist revolution took place in Somalia, and when at that time the people of Somaliland were labeled anti-revolutionaries. And when a country who is labeled anti-revolutionary is considered to be a criminal, a traitor, a rebel, and the ideas that emanate from the people who are labeled anti-revolutionaries should not be adopted and should be at time were labeled destroying the state, people who were fragmenting the nation of Somalia. Never was it mentioned that there were people who were fighting for the freedom, the identity, and the democracy, and the human rights of the people of the former British Somaliland Protectorate. It should also be remembered that throughout those 49 years, there have been diplomatic missions around the world, the United Nations, the European Union, and diplomatic missions. and diplomats in different countries who were rarely from Somaliland. And the diplomats in those missions and in those organizations were always people from Somalia, former Italian Somaliland, or La Somalia Italiana, who always preached that the people belonging to the land of former British Somaliland were criminals and were rebels. The people of Somaliland had no access to the ears of decision makers around the world. The people of Somaliland were denied a fair hearing. The people of Somaliland were denied their day in court. The people of Somaliland were never given a chance to appeal, to describe, and to state their case. So the fact that for the past 25 years, Somaliland has been denied the political recognition that it has a right to have should be no mystery, because for 49 years, nobody has heard about Somaliland. And it is democratic nations, like the people of New Zealand and the people of Great Britain, whose empire we once belonged to support the case of Somaliland, not because Somaliland is trying to take something away from Somalia, but because Somaliland has a right to exist. Somaliland has a legal case. Somaliland would be a useful member of the peoples of the Horn of Africa, because the peace, the democracy, and the stability of Somaliland plays a very important role in the peace and the stability of the entire Horn of Africa. And I would like our guests here today from African countries to take back to their people that they visited Somaliland. They could not visit Somalia. They would have been killed. That they visited Somaliland, where there's a people living in that country who are struggling for their human rights to exist, not to destroy, but to build Africa, not to take anything away from anybody else, but to support anything that is going to be positively supporting peace, stability, and the human rights of peoples around the world, and particularly in Africa. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Esther Amma. I'm with the Ghanaian delegation as well, and it's my first time in Somaliland. I also, like Amma, was ignorant of the geographical location and the reality of Somaliland. But as a journalist who also straddles art and literature, I just want to talk about the power of media. You both mentioned it. Not just that we use media, but how we use it. There is a particular power in social media that would allow the story of Somaliland to be told through virtual mobilization. So you may not ever get on a plane and get the chance to experience the beauty and the culture and the people, but there is power in a hashtag. There is a way in which social media can galvanize and recognize and organize faster than so many other things. And as somebody who is both a media lecturer and a practitioner, I was sitting here saying, what if there was a hashtag recognize Somaliland. So from the diasporans to someone like me who is Ghanaian in New York and London, the stories of the people can be told and heard internationally whether people travel here or not. I'm inspired by our powerful sister here who talked about how do you support. You need not necessarily support with your geographical mobilization, but what if you actually engaged some social media? You have an extraordinary young people. I was watching people take amazing selfies and pictures. What if they were all uploaded with a hashtag recognize Somaliland, so people in the north and the east just on this one space. So somebody who is passionate about media, engaged in media, uses media, social media, traditional media, broadcast media, there is a way to expand the story because people always move faster than politicians. And the politics can follow the people where the people's power is articulated loudly enough, powerfully enough, in a way and in a message that resonates across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marwa, Ednad, and Ismail, and Esther, both for your contributions, and I'll open it up again to the panel. But if I may abuse my chairing privileges as well, and on the back of that add a question which ties to our theme here, and we can close it with that. I wondered, Dr. Saad Ali Shire and Professor Ambassador Iqbal Jusbai as well, both of you came from outside of politics. You've also had careers outside of politics. And based on what you've outlined, your experience in the private sector, the strategic plan for recognition in Somaliland almost reads like a business plan. And of course, Ambassador Jusbai, your academic work has also greatly influenced your diplomacy. So I wondered how experiencing different sectors has aided you in your current jobs, and how that has developed you as leaders yourselves.
Well, thank you very much. I just would like to thank our sister from Ghana for her comments and suggestions. First, I would like to thank Edna Aden, the former foreign minister, for her eloquent presentation of the case of Somaliland. I think that was only enough for Somaliland to be recognized. But with regard to the communication and the power of communication, even though we haven't exhausted the entire potential of using communication to promote Somaliland, we did start something. We have now an entire department for communication. We have a website, we use the Facebook, the Twitter, and so on to reach out to more people. And in fact, we have a petition which says recognize Somaliland now in the internet. So we're getting there, but there's more to be done. And thank you very much for your suggestions and comments. With regard to how my previous experience, helping me or even hindering me to become to carry out the functions of a foreign ministry. And of course, when you board to the management is really a very important thing. My experience in the past 6 years is that one of the shortcomings of politicians is the lack of management skills. I mean, people know how to talk as a politician. They have been doing this for many years, of course. But I think, for example, if you are a minister or a head of an agency, you really need to be a good manager and a good leader, And that's something we bring from, the previous sectors in which we worked. Iqbal.
It's a difficult question in some ways. Well, I've found the impact on our day-to-day lives is of course shaped, as I mentioned earlier on, by some of our earlier experiences. In my case, in high school, of course, we all joined the anti-apartheid struggle and became members of the then banned ANC, the African National Congress. So our history in the African National Congress, as I mentioned, the interaction, the fact that the ANC was a recipient of Somali hospitality, shapes a lot of your approaches in day-to-day life. Within academia, the tools of rigor, of analysis, of thoroughness, and I think even in diplomacy, you need a human caring approach to diplomacy. So when you would sit with like a great leader like Mandela, you saw he was a diplomat, at the same time that human touch, that human caring approach impacts on you in ways which you later can recognize a bit more visibly. I cannot but also support the fact of the points mentioned earlier on. I mean, Dr. Edna, when she gave me her business card yesterday, on the back of the business card is a map of Somaliland which says something to the effect of where is Somaliland. Yeah? I would encourage every one of you to have your business card, if you belong to a Somaliland institution, to do the same. So our sisters from Ghana, of course, would enjoy recognizing the geographical GPS coordinates of Somaliland. Invited also by the United Nations Training Center, which is in Accra. And I spoke there at that a panel on Somaliland. And the respondent to my presentation there was none other than the Foreign Minister of Ethiopia, Minister Seyum. And it was widely reported in the media. So if you go back to media reports on Somaliland in 2007, you'll see a lot of reporting. So I found that the Ghanaian media were willing to bring to the fore the case of Somaliland. I also remember at that point the then Ghanaian foreign minister, who now I understand is running as a presidential candidate. This is 2000. I found for the case of Somaliland. Now, I remember at that the question of Somaliland came up and was given a further push. And the decision was taken that the AU's Peace and Security Council would have to make time to look at this case. And that was the case I mentioned where Rwanda took forward the case of Somaliland. So from my experience of Ghana, from the early days of struggle, when we were fighting the apartheid government, I believe Ghana can play a critical role within West Africa, along with many of the other pivotal states in West Africa, like Nigeria. I don't see this as very, very difficult. I remember in the UN Security Council in 2011, when there were some countries wanted mining sanctions. I think you know which country that is. South Africa and Nigeria cooperated on this UN Security Council resolution to say there should not be economic sanctions on any African country on mining. So if we could achieve that in some areas, I believe with the right home host. So this morning when I had to dress, and I must admit I was late, and as I opened my bag, I saw my Ghana bow tie. I think I'll stop there and
It looks like we've come to the end of this panel, but of course it won't be the end of the conversation we're having on leadership more generally and its application to foreign relations and Somaliland's development overall. I want to thank our panelists for an incredibly insightful contribution, which was accessible, engaging, personal, technical, and intellectual. And we're incredibly fortunate to have ministers